Hey everyone, today I'd like to make an extremely long retrospect video on Armored Core. This retrospect video will cover the franchise as a whole, the story, the basic controls, and most importantly, the community at hand. If you're new to the franchise, this video will help you understand some things and the situation of Armored Core at hand. This is going to be an extremely long video, so make sure to sit back and watch. As for Armored Core, the series at a fundamental level is a mecha action game with a post-apocalyptic theme. This is more apparent in later entries, specifically Armored Core 5 and Verdict Day. The series has 3 different universes in the game, each with a similar backstory, although each are also told differently. These 3 universes are split into the original universe consisting of Armored Core 1, Project Phantasma, Master of Arena, 2, and To Another Age. Then the 3rd gen universe starts with 3, Silent Line, Nexus, 9 Breaker, Last Raven, and somewhere in between these, Formula Front. But no one really talks about Formula Front. Finally, the Lynx universe, consisting of Armored Core 4, 5, and Verdict Day, consists of the latest universe in the series. All of these universes have an event known as the Great Destruction, which drives humanity underground for decades, sometimes even for centuries at a time. The Armored Core itself, which is a successor to a piloted mech used for construction, known as the Muscle Trainer, was a rediscovered tool of war, and you, as a mercenary known as a Raven, pilot these mechs, often working for corporations and trade for credits, the currency used in Armored Core. You complete missions, known as sorties in-game, doing specific tasks for various reasons, but you'll almost always have some form of resistance, such as MTs in these missions. You will have great fights, sometimes going even as far to fight and destroy other Ravens in combat to complete your mission. Anyways, that's enough of the introduction. Armored Core has always been an interesting game from the start, but Armored Core also has its issues. But one thing I should note before disclosing any of these issues is that despite many of these issues, Armored Core as a whole still has merits for each individual game. And as such, I still recommend you give each game a try, despite what I'm going to say. Anyhow, Armored Core is most commonly split between 5 generations. Some people also split Generation 3 into early Generation 3 and late Generation 3 as well, despite only having 3 universes. Generation 1 and 2 are together, as well as Generations 4 and 5. Each of these generations have their own individual problems, as well as general problems the entire series has, but each generation also has its merits as well. As for each generation, these are the issues that each of them suffers. For Generation 1, the camera has issues particularly relating to the camera jerking around when you're near walls or near a corner. The game also lags quite a bit with explosions, and that's a particularly big problem when many weapons make explosions in this game. Some of them are rapid fire, particularly with weapon arms, and the weapons in Generation 1 are a lot less accurate in Generation 2 onwards. As for Generation 2's problem, it didn't implement analog controls, despite that being the standard for PlayStation 2 titles. It added a lot of missions that give a game over screen if your Armored Core gets destroyed in a mission, which sends you back to the main menu, which screws over those that don't save their game often. While this was in Generation 1, it was nowhere near as prevalent in Armored Core 2 onwards, and you could leave the mission in those games and not get a game over. Whereas if you quit in Armored Core 2 onwards, you still get the game over screen. Early Generation 3, which consists of Armored Core 3 and Silent Line, didn't implement analog controls either, despite being given 4 years to do so between the release of Armored Core Master of Arena and Silent Line Armored Core. Early Generation 3 also has too big of an emphasis on ranks, and Silent Line held an overwhelming majority of the hidden parts behind S rankings, as well as other challenges. They still didn't remove the game over screen. Late Generation 3, which includes Nexus, Ninebreaker, and Last Raven. In Armored Core 3 and Silent Line, there was a normal mode and a hard mode. Hard mode had the lockbox smaller and may have affected other things as well. Armored Core Nexus removed the option to play on normal mode and made hard mode the default. This also coincides with the series also getting much more difficult by default. These games individually have a lot of problems on their own, but for the most part, this is the issue all of these share. Now for Generation 4, Armored Core 4 and 4 Answer, it's way too complex, and it adds parts like stabilizers and an overwhelmingly massive tuning system. While the tuning system was in Armored Core Nexus and Last Raven, it was overhauled and it was made a lot bigger as such. Despite offering to automatically equip stabilizers for you and tune your system for you, I still feel like this series has gotten way too complex in an already extremely complex series to begin with. This might feel like a nitpick, and this might even be a bit of a personal opinion, but in Armored Core especially, I feel the Primal Armor system feels like it does too much against normal enemies and normal ACs, whereas it feels like it does absolutely nothing against other Next. This is a problem, and it feels like there's not quite a good balance between your primal armor depleting against waves of enemies, while not depleting completely within seconds of encountering an opposing Next. Now for Generation 5, which includes Armored Core 5 and Verdict Day, I believe that it has too much of an emphasis on multiplayer, and the main new addition, Ultimate Weapons, feel like they don't have a big enough of an impact. The amount of emphasis put into multiplayer specifically, without even offering a chance for you to play with UNAX, despite the Generation's games heavily boasting about UNAX, to the point of where UNAX are even directly involved in the storyline of Armored Core Verdict Day. This is a problem as it ruins replayability quite a lot, to the point of where nearly half of what you can do in the game is now unavailable due to the low player count, especially on international servers. New players who also manage to start in Verdict Day late don't get a chance to do a lot of the online content unless they find other players, and Armored Core 5 doesn't even allow you to go online anymore. These missions that you can do with other players include specifically World Mode, or Conquest as others know it, which relies on you playing with up to 4 other players in a mission for various purposes. While some of these world mode missions can be soloed, many others, notably boss fights, cannot be soloed on one's own. All of these issues with the Generations and the massive amount of differences between them have created quite a big tear in the community as a whole. Some will praise one generation or game, for example, Armored Core 4 Answer, and they will completely shun any other generation for not being in their taste. However, I can't blame them, as it is their opinion, and we all have reasons to respect that. However, what I do not personally respect is attacking others for their opinions, and this is one of the reasons why many players are particularly jaded when it comes to Armored Core discussions. Considering Armored Core 4 and 4 Answer were the first games in the PlayStation 3, and this was often considered to be a large new audience, that group of players turned out to be disappointed when the game formula that they really liked ended up being changed with Armored Core 5. It's a bit unfortunate, but looking back retrospectively, it honestly was a bit of a stupid decision by From Software. They had garnered a player base which really liked the fast pace of Armored Core 4 and 4 Answer, and they lost some of that player base when they slowed down the gameplay and rebalanced a lot of the stuff in Armored Core 5. However, I don't blame them at all for slowing down the gameplay or rebalancing anything, as it was honestly an improvement for Armored Core as a whole. Armored Core's problems weren't limited to the Generation 4 players. Some of the players from the very beginning have disliked the changes from Generation 3 to 4 or 4 to 5. There was 2 fundamentally large changes to the basic formula of Armored Core, and some may go as far to say that Armored Core was fundamentally changed after Last Raven. That's partially true, as Armored Core abandoned the model of exploring areas as well as hidden parts inside missions for larger, faster-paced missions. Some may claim this to be an improvement, others may claim it to be a step backwards. Anyways, to recite, Armored Core's main problem is that it went too long without introducing any drastic changes to the main formula, which left players with an expectation that there wouldn't be any drastic changes. This is similar to how Pokemon currently is, and plenty of other game series too, like Mega Man. And then when changes finally arrived with Armored Core 4, some new players did come, but Armored Core 5 got another change, and the new players that were gained from Armored Core 4, and even some of the veterans were largely uninterested in yet another gameplay change. This poses a problem because if Armored Core 6 were to be announced, and has yet another drastic change to the formula, it may be criticized and given a poor reputation because the formula was changed too much to gain a sizable fan base between generations. If I'm going to state which generation I like the most, it would probably be Generation 2. It's definitely not the best generation, but I find it to be the least offensive. If you don't mind there not being analog control, and you probably wouldn't if you started from Armored Core 1 onwards, then you probably wouldn't have too much difficulty with the games. This also coincides with the fact that Armored Core 2 has a good difficulty curve and isn't too terribly difficult, whereas Another Age only has one extremely difficult mission, but the rest of the missions are also pretty fair. But all in all, I wouldn't let someone ruin your experiences with the game. I honestly recommend you give each game a try, even if it means you have to use an emulator. If you're remotely interested in any of the games, and I've showed all of them by the way, you may find one that you really like. Some may like the newer games, some may like the older games. It doesn't really matter. I've been with Armored Core since Master of Arena released, and I do admit that I like some games better than others, but I don't really hate any game. And even if I did, I wouldn't criticize others for their choice of game. But this is just something I wanted to point out for newer players who may be interested in conversations. While some websites still exist for conversations, the best conversations you're going to get is probably in the Armored Core subreddit. We have a few people that actively browse the subreddit and engage in friendly conversations, such as me, Griffenix, From Cheng, Potato, and a few others. There's also quite a few people on the Discord server, and while they for the most part play Armored Core 5 and Verdict Day, there's a fair bit of discussion about Generation 4 and even earlier generations as well. The moderators in that server are also fairly friendly, notably Sash Perennial. I've seen them greet new users before. You'll definitely have a lot of good discussions there, even if it may not be directly related to Armored Core as a whole. Armored Core may be a particularly shaky series as far as the community goes, but I believe it to be a really good game franchise despite its flaws, and it manages to outdo other games in the same genre by quite a large margin. Thankfully, the 20th anniversary just came, and we did just get confirmation that Armored Core Verdict Day won't be the last entry in the series. I've grown up with this series, and I truly love everything about it. I hope that some newer players will come someday, see my videos, try the game out, and have the same amount of fun that I had when I was growing up with these games. Anyways, this is an overall retrospect with Armored Core, and I'd like to hear your opinions about this video. This is the longest video I've done yet, and it'll probably be the longest video for quite a while. I hope you all enjoyed this. I'm going to continue my videos on Armored Core, namely more retrospect videos and guides, and I'll see you guys then.